Hello, my name is Harold Swifty Shaver, and we're here at the Morgantown History Museum today speaking with Miss Pamela Ball. It's nice to have you here today, Pam. Would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. I grew up in Fairmont, West Virginia, which is in Marion County, not far away, and went to West Fairmont High School. And after I got out of high school, I got married, and I went to live in different places where there were Air Force bases. And after that period of time was over, my late ex-husband got out of the military. We came to Morgantown so he could go to school, but I decided that I would like to go to school. So I got work-study jobs and was in school from the early 70s to 1976 when I graduated with a BS degree in social work. And I worked for a family service association as a social worker working with homeless and substance abuse folks for several years. And then I decided I probably should be doing something else. That was a very tough job. And I opened up an antique shop on Walnut Street, which was called Collector's Alley. I've been collecting antiques and collectibles for a long time, so I sort of put that to use in the shop, and it was a very cute shop. It was on the top of Walnut Street. And we specialized in unusual items. And then during that time, I opened a couple other antique shops that were not in town, and made the decision to go to grad school. And I'm forgetting that one part. Yeah, right before I went to grad school, I started up the Trinity Episcopal Church Community Kitchen. And that organization that I started in '82 is still operating today in 2018. So it's been very successful.
Who asked you to do this, Pam?
The pastor of the Episcopal Church, Father David, asked me to do that. And I worked with an old gentleman that was in the congregation there for many years. He was in his 80s, mid-80s, Dr. Philip True, and he was an emeritus professor in biology at the university, and was very interested in homeless issues and issues of substance abuse and all of those types of things. He was a wonderful gentleman. And he helped me for the first 2 weeks, and then he said, "You're on your own." It was a lot for someone that age to be doing. But then I was told about the public history program at the university, and because I'd been collecting things for years and I'd been involved with the antique business, history was obviously something I was interested in. And I entered the WVU Public History program in '83 and had lots of contract jobs that were really very interesting, doing National Register nominations on one that I did was New Hill Coal Camp. Another one was out, one was in Greenmont. They were all over the area, really. So I did a lot of National Register work as a contractor. And then after doing the National Register nominations on different properties, I decided to go about trying to get a really good contract job, which I managed to do by writing a grant to the U.S. Forest Service. They needed someone to document all the CCC camps that had existed in the 1930s during the Depression. And if CCC was a Civilian Conservation Corps. It was sort of like a paramilitary thing, but they mostly what they accomplished around the country and the state was building state parks or renovating them. And
so that's how you got your writing skills.
Yes, if I wanted a job, I had to write the grant to get it, so I did lots of that. But anyway, the Forest Service job was quite interesting. I lived in the forest, this was for the U.S. Forest Service. I lived in the forest from March 1st to end of June 30th. And live in the forest, that's what I meant. I didn't go stay in motels. There was 3 of us. And we stayed in tents and also in the back of the van, depending on weather conditions, which were not good in the dead of winter up in the mountains in the Mon National Forest. The only thing I was disappointed about during my stint doing that job was that I never saw a bear. And I thought I was going to see all these bears and stuff. Well, it didn't happen. The gentleman in one of the administrative sites said, "Pam, I've been doing this job for 20-some years and I haven't seen one bear except just the one who ran in front of my window in the office. He ran by, and that was the only one I've ever seen." I did see lots of turkeys and all kinds of wonderful things. That was probably the job that I did that was the most interesting over the years.
How did you get started with the Morgantown History Museum?
I guess the interest in the history as it is in museum history, which is different than historic preservation history, which I've been doing, is when I took the job to do over and to be the curator of the Job Prickett House at Prickett's Fort State Park, which is in Marion County. So I was working with that from the time, the Job House, from the time there were animals living in it, like a fox and snakes and stuff, to when it was open. And I also, because of my antique background, did purchase all of the artifacts inside the house that's open to the public. So my history interest in terms of museum work came from that. So I had that planted in my head. And I guess the way that the history museum evolved, which is an interesting story in itself, I had been living on the coast of North Carolina with my late ex-husband. And then he was injured in a very bad industrial accident where he was in the hospital for months. And then after he was released and went through rehab, we moved back to the Morgantown, Fairmont area. And once people knew I was back in town, they started approaching me to do different types of things. And one of them was not a contract job, but it was to start up a museum acquisition effort. And the person who asked me to do that was Dr. Barbara Howe, who used to be the head of the WVU Public History Program. So another lady and myself, her name was Jane Labus, she and I started the effort to obtain and develop a museum in Morgantown. Well, there's a lot of, when you start something like that, there's a lot of pre-work that you do to lay a foundation to try to have an organization. Once we developed that, the organization was called Riverfront Museum Incorporated. And one of my friends back then who owned Seneca Center, Marcia Brand, gave us a little tiny operating space that was very tiny indeed, tiny, smaller than the one we had here upstairs. So it was about 300 square feet maybe. And so we operated the Riverfront Museum from that site. So that was the organization that was the predecessor to Morgantown History Museum. We operated for several years. We did not have backing from the city or the county or any government agency. It was just a private 501c3 organization. It was an outgrowth, the Riverfront Museum was an outgrowth of the Chamber of Commerce Vision 2000 program. And then about a year into putting together this effort called Riverfront Museum Incorporated, the woman who was president of that organization, Jane Labus, died in the TWA 800 disaster over Long Island Sound. So I was voted in, because I was the vice president, to head it up. And that's how the Morgantown History Museum evolved, but that was the predecessor organization, and it evolved eventually into the Morgantown History Museum. I always had in the back of my mind Jane and what we were trying to accomplish, and I felt driven by the fact that she wanted that so badly, and I did too. So I stayed with the the Riverfront Museum. We had some events, we collected some stuff. We were given a gift of 5,000 pieces of Seneca glass by a gentleman, Mr. Cohen, who used to own Cohen's Furniture Store. And that sort of started it off in a real way. So I worked with that for several years, and then it just wasn't going anywhere. It was because we didn't have backing from the city or the county or the state. And so I separated myself from it because it was taking up all of my time, literally. So it didn't last very long after I stopped. And the items that we'd collected, the city decided at that point to take what we had and put it in storage for us, which they did do at the old Wiles Hill School. They put it where the gymnasium is now. So they put it in storage, and I was asked to take over the effort for the city to start a history museum that would depict the history of Morgantown. Well, they called me several times, and each time I told them no, because it took over my life. It didn't allow a lot for anything else, and I wasn't going to do it. Well, the fifth time that I was called was the mayor himself, he said, now come on, Pam, because I knew him from, that was Mr. Justice, Ron Justice. And he said, now, I know you from the Riverfront Museum. I know you can do this, and I want you to. And I finally said, oh, okay. I just didn't want to do it, but I go, okay, you beat me up, I'll do it. Yeah. The rest is history, so to speak. And that was back in the spring of 2005, he talked me into that, or maybe summer. I had my first Morgantown Museum Commission meeting in August of 2005, and had a pretty good commission to start up with. And they didn't expect me to move fast with it, because they told me later, you moved much faster with this than we anticipated. They didn't know that I'd want a real place. They just thought I'd meet for a long time or something. Mm-hmm. I said, listen, if you hire me, or if you choose for me to go running down the field with the ball, I'm not going to stand still, I'm going to run. That's what I did. I said, I want this to happen while I'm still breathing. Yeah. You know, that's my purpose here. Mm-hmm. So we started up at that first meeting, August 2005, and by December, I had us the space upstairs in the old Tanner office complex. It was very tiny, but it worked for a beginning. And we had our first little small museum opening on West Virginia Day in June of 2006. And then we just kept going with it, and we've taken it quite a long ways. The night we had the opening for the space downstairs in December of 2011, and I saw like 600 people trooping through here all night long with wonderful food that was from a fancy caterer, and people having all their beautiful, nice, fancy clothes on. It seemed like it was a fairy tale, and that it couldn't be true. Because I'd worked all those years from 1995, and here it was 2011, all those years to do this, and then it happened.
It happened, yes.
It happened, so it was like unbelievable almost.
How is the Morgantown History Museum funded?
The funding comes primarily from the city of Morgantown. They've been our main support since they started us up in 2005. They pay the majority of our expenses, and then we pick up other expenses for special things. We also have gotten help since 2009 or 8 from, I think it was 2009, from the Morgantown Monongalia County Commission. I've written grants to them every year, and thus far I've been given money every year, and we've used it for things that we couldn't possibly afford, like computers and refrigerator and all types of equipment that we've needed. We also got a large grant from Senator Beach through a program that he told me about that provided a stipend for something in Mon County, but nonprofits that needed a stipend, and we were chosen as one of those few people to get one. They only gave me about a minute to decide what I needed, though, when that happened. He said, well, it's $1,500. What do you need? And I said, oh, we need lots of things. But he said, you'll have to tell me really fast because this has to go to the floor tomorrow and all that. And going, oh my, I was in Sam's Club. Going, oh. I said, oh, we need a really good camera that will shoot regular film, and then we, digital, and then we also need a camera that will pick up, so it ended up to be the same camera, but a good one. Video, because we did videos in the museum. And I also need a flatbed, large format scanner. I think we chose the right things, but it was hard to do with no notice like that. But he was very good to us and has always tried to be very supportive to our efforts, which I certainly appreciate. And in mentioning Mr. Senator Beach, I'd also like to mention the other person who's really stood behind us from the get-go and has tried really hard to help us. And that is former County Commissioner John Piles. He has been wonderful to us. And also my uncle, who lives in Birmingham, Alabama, and has given us gifts. He's given us more gifts than anyone else since we started up. So those people have been our supporters financially. Then we have another group of people, way too many to mention, friends of the Morgantown History Museum that give us a membership and provide money through the memberships. And then other people make gifts when they come in and like the museum, and they'll put a donation in our donation box.
Tell us about the people that are on the Morgantown History Museum Commission.
Well, in the beginning, when I first had the first commission in 2005, they were most all of them connected with history in some way. But that has changed over time. And the group is a pretty varied group now, and as it should be. We've had people that, one member that stands out in my mind is Thurmond, who he's no longer here in town, but He was the head of communications for WVU B&E School, but he's the one that started the Flatboat Project when he was here. That has still not been completed at this point, but we hope it will be in the future for Phase 3. But he was an interesting commissioner over time, but he was, you know, a communications person. We have another person who, Christy Venom, who works at the WVU West Virginia Collection Library. We have Rick Mcewen, who is an interior designer for Chuck's Furniture here in Morgantown. We have Matt.
Yeah, I'm trying to think myself.
Yeah, I just won't mention the last name, but Matt, who I should remember all the names. You're going to have to edit this for goodness sakes. Yeah, he was a contractor doing historic preservation contracting, but now he's back in school for art and design. And we have, let's see, Ron Delaney, who is the city council rep for us. He's the city councilor and has been very effective since he's been on the commission as of last year. Let's see.
Rodney Piles.
Oh yeah, Rodney Piles. Rodney is a House of Delegates member in the West Virginia legislature, and we have had in the past, she hadn't been able to attend meetings for a little while, but she was still a member and volunteered as she could, and that was Pamela Casto. She was a NASA scientist, but she died 2 weeks ago, and she did a great deal of work with us over, I think I met her at an arts walk. Arts on the River, yes. And I wanted her to join because she had archaeological experience. None of us had. We had history experience above ground. She had history experience below the ground, archaeologist, as a person who was a amateur archaeologist, but very seasoned. So we had her, and we certainly will miss her, that's for sure. She would be doing more as she retired, and she was going to retire next year.
We had Jim Snyder.
Jim Snyder is an interesting fellow. He's sort of been in a holding pattern right now for working with us.
It's funny you say a holding pattern.
Yeah, it is.
His background.
Yes, that's right.
Flying airplanes.
Flying airplanes, yeah. But he, throughout his lifetime, for about 40 years, he was the head news reporter for the ABC News in Washington, D.C. He was...
And NASA.
And he also worked with NASA as well. And he was considered, and is considered, one of the main forces in terms of knowledge of the space program. Mm-hmm. Very knowledgeable man. Well, the current mayor has been very active with the museum, Bill Kowecki. He's had an interest in the museum since we were upstairs, actually, when he wasn't even on city council back then. Jenny Selin is another person on city council who's been on city council for a very long time, who came to our museum the first opening we had in 2006. She continues to be a force, like Bill Kowecki, in trying to help advance this effort. And we are in a process right now of trying to get a different space to operate in. I've been meeting with people from the city and from your community foundation, and as the other group is Mr. Cutright he runs the Brick Street B&E, WVU B&E School entrepreneurial program. And he's working with us to develop a long-range business plan for the museum. And we're also trying to get a different operating space within this group that's functioning. That started up last fall and is continuing probably till sometime this summer. That's a big effort we've been involved in more recently. I was trying to think of other people
who headed Bow Park, and the current Mrs. Wiles, who is the head of Bow Park.
Yes, they've helped us quite a bit over time.
Darryl DeGriff in the past.
Darryl DeGriff was my favorite, really my favorite commissioner. That guy worked so hard. One of the things he did when he was on the commission when we first started up, soon after we started up in August 2005, I got a call from my old friend Bruce Summers, who owns Pathfinder. And he said, I know that you're doing this, starting up this museum. He said, I'm going to close down the bike shop on the waterfront, and I've got wooden cases that you might want. You don't have to pay for them, but they need work done. Well, that was an understatement. We were glad to get them, and we used them, and we still do have them. But Darryl DeGriff was ready to roll with trying to fix those cases, and he'd work all day out at the winery, Stewartstown winery, and then would come in upstairs and work on renovating those cases. And it took him 80-some hours to strip those things, get glass in them, and to put a finish on them. 80-some hours when he was already tired. And no matter what I ever asked him to do, he was right there to do it. But unfortunately, we lost him as a member because he took a really good history job in Beverly, West Virginia, which is right outside of Elkins. We were sad to lose him, but we're glad he got a job in his field finally. Yeah, he was a great one. Oh, I'm remembering Charlie Byer is one of my favorites too, and I failed to. Yeah, he's a commissioner.
Ross Justice.
Yes, Ross Justice, our young member. Ross was the person who got us the Manette drums that I've been wanting for a long time for the museum. He was able to finally pull that off and get those for us from the Manette Drum Company. And then Charlie Byer's just been a force to reckon with. He's done a lot of things for us, and he's been on the commission a long time.
Former city councilman.
He was a former city council person, yes. Yep, very effective. Always willing to help when he can.
How many people does the Morgantown History Museum get in a year?
Around 1,800 per year.
That's quite a bit. That's
yes, it is.
Visitors.
Yes.
Plus all the parades that we go downtown, and all the people that.
Well, that was thousands, Swifty. I'm glad that you restored that VW mascot car for us to use. That was really great.
I try to promote it with my love bug. Try to promote the museum when parades. And
yeah.
stuff. What exhibits have you had at the museum?
Well, I'm going to start out with the smallest one we had, which was the first one we had. It was very tiny. It was in that 400 square foot entryway space we had upstairs. And it was in, as I'd mentioned, it was June of 2006, West Virginia Day, and we had it on West Virginia Day. And we had my old friend Mark Crabtree, old-time fiddler, play Civil War related tunes because it was West Virginia Day. Mm-hmm. So he and another friend played for that, and we had an exhibit of what we had gathered basically at that point from the Riverfront Museum organization, mm-hmm. which included the printing press. Okay. Mr. Hastings, who owns Hastings Funeral Home, called me one day years ago when it was still Riverfront Museum and asked me if we wanted the printing press. And I said, oh yes, we would like to have that. He said, well, it's going to take about 5 men and a lift truck to get it out of here.
Which is how I got involved.
That's how you got involved.
I was listening to WCLG one day and heard that there was a printing press at the museum, and I visited, and I've been involved ever since.
That's right. And I remember what you said when you walked in the door. Michael was up there then, sitting in the office, and I was talking to him.
Michael Mackert.
Michael Mackert, who was our assistant coordinator for 7.5 years, and he was a wonderful person and advanced what we were doing in terms of developing good exhibits and working to create them. He's now teaching at WVU in the foreign language department. But when I was standing there talking to Michael and you came in, you were sort of breathless, and you said, I ran all the way here when I heard on WCLG there was a museum and that has a printing press. That was so funny. I never forgot that.
And I do demonstrations here, which are very popular with
yes,
the
you do.
printing press that we got. I run it, and I really enjoy doing that for people.
Well, the kids in particular, I think, really enjoy that, but the adults do as well. That's a big draw to have that when we have a tour. So we're glad you're willing to still do that.
I really enjoy that. So. Do you have outside of the museum exhibits? You go out in the public?
That's how I developed the museum, actually, was by early on going to every event imaginable, every talk I could give. I was on the road all the time. I've given talks to the Isaac Walton League. I've given talks in Western PA in Waynesburg to the Western Pennsylvania Genealogical Society. I've given talks to the Rotary in Morgantown and the DAR. You name it, I've done it. Anyway, that's how I promoted it early on. We had no money for promotions. I also, the other thing I did was to take a small exhibit from the museum and do every event on the waterfront. Arts on the River, and that really made a difference for us in terms of people recognizing that there was indeed a museum. So that helped further us quite a bit. I'd say that particular thing, taking things off site, probably was more effective than anything else we could have done, really. So our first big event that we had was when we opened in this new space in December 11th. I think it was the 10th. It was 2011, but I don't remember the date in December. But it was a Smithsonian exhibit, what's called a Smithsonian traveling exhibit. And Michael and I wrote a grant to the Humanities, West Virginia Humanities, to try to obtain one of those spots. They only had 6 positions, and we did get one. I was shocked, because there's a lot of competition. And that first Smithsonian that we got was called The Way We Worked. And that night when we opened the museum down here for the first time, we had the opening for the Smithsonian exhibit, The Way We Worked. We had reporters in here from all over the place. It was quite a big event. We had about 600 people all evening going through, because it won't hold 600 people one time, but that was our largest event that we've ever had, actually. We've also had another Smithsonian exhibit entitled Hometown Teams, which was a few years ago, I think 4 years ago. 2014, 4 years ago. And we had people from all the schools, all the officials from all the schools in the county provide items for us from their school with their logo on it, from their teams, different types of teams. And I believe that's the only time that's ever happened in Morgantown. We have had one of the exhibits that people have reacted to, maybe one of the most positive, is the one we have up now about Tony Pietro and his visionary, the way he envisioned things. And he was a person an immigrant who came here from Italy with basically nothing, but he had something that other people didn't have, unbelievable stonemason skills.
Yes.
And he ended up becoming a multimillionaire back when that was a very unusual thing. He built what's known as the Tony Pietro Castle, which is a landmark in Morgantown. He built many roads in Morgantown.
And walls.
And walls and all types of things.
Brick streets.
Brick streets, yes. But anyway, that's been a very popular exhibit. The railroad exhibit, the M&K exhibit.
We've had some really nice exhibits here. And the railroad exhibit was one of my favorites.
Yeah, he had worked on that 3 years. Even before he went to grad school, he was working on that.
And that was?
Ian.
Ian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot Ian's last name.
Ian was in grad school here, and he did that as part of his schoolwork. Chris McGuffin, who was here last year and worked on the Tony Pietro exhibit, which has been so popular. He was also a WVU public history student, and this was part of his schoolwork to finish school. One exhibit that I might mention that Michael Mackert, our former assistant coordinator, developed, a lot of it on his own, I helped him some, was the exhibit about Morgantown's airport and flying. And he had a particular interest in that.
Jim Snyder did
Jim Snyder did some of the things for that as well.
What about Don Knotts?
That was the thing that allowed us to, it brought a lot of things to us. The Bennett family of California from Pasadena wanted to donate 125 items of Don Knotts things, many of them autographed. That was huge. I didn't even know there was 125 items that were signed like that. So I started communicating with that family in September of 2006, and by February 1st, I believe it was, of 2007, the family sent me by UPS the 125 Don Knotts pieces. Well, how that parlayed into making this museum get backing it didn't have and put it on the map, so to speak, was getting those items. And the reason that is true is because John Piles, that I mentioned earlier, a county commissioner, knew Don and was really very interested in him, knew the family, and when he found out that we had received 125 items, I was asked to write a county commission grant proposal to try to get some county money. Mm-hmm. And that, having that Don Knotts material so I could pull off a museum display is what gave us that first county money, which was so important to us. Then the city realized that we had the 125 items. They decided that I should have an exhibit of Don Knotts, but we were upstairs and 400 square feet, we didn't have the space for that. So we were lucky and got a space up the street at the Arts Monongahela facility on High Street, and had the Don Knotts exhibit, and I called it Don Knotts Memories, and we had a huge crowd there. People came from all over the place, not just West Virginia, to see that. And I had 10, at least 10, there could have been more, cameramen lined up in a line to interview me. They were from all over the place. We never had that type of attention. Don Knotts still creates that kind of attention. Yeah. And so the city was so pleased with that exhibit and what had happened, they decided to have a citywide Don Knotts Hometown Festival in 2008, the next year. So I helped plan that festival. Had another exhibit that I expanded, the #1 exhibit I had, to be a good bit larger. Got items from Don Knott's widow to expand the exhibit. They had a Don Knott's Barney look-alike contest that drew people from even California. The whole country was represented. Karen Knott's, his widow, was here.
No, not his daughter.
And yes, that's right. His daughter came and did a presentation at the Met.
Was here
Francie Knott's.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, that Don Knott's project, 1 and 2, but the festival in particular, was very heart-wrenching to see all these people coming dressed as Barney, trying to win that $1,000 prize. And I will tell you that the little fella that won had muscular dystrophy. He was in a wheelchair, and he had on a wonderful Barney outfit.
Did he?
And
I missed that.
he was about 10 years old, and everyone's heart was just melted when they took him up to the front of the stage at the Metropolitan Theater that night.
Well, we're going to have to wrap up here, so I wanted to ask one more question. What does the future hold for the museum?
Well, after my life has been given over to this, just about, because I started with the project of a history museum in Morgantown back in 1995, and this is 2018. Do the math for yourself. That is a really big thing, and it's like my baby after all these years of all the work and everything, and trying to develop it further and further. My hope is my current work with the B&E entrepreneurial program and the folks at the Your Community Foundation and the city will allow us to move to a larger space, and we can develop it even further. I would like for the building someday to have a building just for the museum.
Yeah.
If we have someone who can provide that.
Most cities in West Virginia have a large building that
Yes,
is
they do.
strictly a museum, and Morgantown's behind in that respect.
Yes, they are, and I'm hoping that that can be remedied at some point. Now, I probably won't be the person to take it into a place that's just maybe built as the museum. Someday it will be.
And have its very own curator and everything like that.
Like like there should be at that point, because they'll have to at that point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Pam.
Well, thank you, Swifty. I appreciate that.
And from all of us at the Morgantown History Museum, we'll see you the next time.